You're listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way. Welcome to the party. I'm Ace Pilot Scarr, coming at you with my Gundam at full power.
I'm Eoin.
And I'm Dave. And we do wonder the eternal question, what is up with mechs?
What is it? Ye, and I cannot stress this enough, haw. We are here for the old mech roundup. Much like classic fighting fantasy book Robot Commando, it's going to be mostly mechs here today. Not a lot of dinos, unfortunately. Mostly mechs, because I've been on a mecha kick. I have been dipping my toe into Lancer. I have been splashing around, reminding myself of the joy of Battletech. And I've even been playing with mechs when they're actually Greek gods or the bodies of Greek gods fighting monsters in Neon Genesis Evangelion inspired hardest board game in the world, Aeon Trespass Odyssey. So we're here to talk about that.
Nice. So, a wide variety.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've got like 3 different things to talk about.
So I'd say that there might be a similarity that I've noticed most of them is that these are, let's say, terrain-focused games, or boards, hexes.
Yeah, absolutely.
You occasionally get people comparing Lancer to Fourth Ed, and I think a lot of that is mainly the, let's say, map mandatory way it's gone. I say it's gone, and that's absolutely not the way to characterize it. It was designed from the get go to have this major tactical element to it. But there's a lot of people in the let's say rules light space who would really like some mecha action.
Well, Scar, I know every person understands 5 or 6 major indie RPGs, and Lancer, of course, but for the uninitiated, let's explain what Lancer is. Lancer is a mecha RPG designed by a comic writer and a wargamer. And as a result, it comes out a little bit different to your standard RPG.
Good.
It is a game set in the far future where you are a specific type of mech pilot called a Lancer who flies a mech. As a result, there's a lot of world building around a far future kind of fairly left-wing organization running the universe and trying to deal with all the non-left-wing bits, being kind of various varieties of nasty. So you pop in and there's a couple of different adventures. They haven't got the full amazing adventure that you can play that kind of explains the universe to you yet, but it's kind of coming. What's cool about Lancer is it is mostly focused on the missions, which are explicitly missions akin to a Final Fantasy Tactics-esque play loop. At the start of your mission, you are given your objectives. Like the GM is meant to give you a briefing, go, this is how you win this mission, this is how you lose this mission. Away we go. So it is much more explicitly mission-based than nearly any other RPG. Where it's like, you have an objective here, it is get this truck to the other side of the map. There are bad guys in the middle here currently, here are the 4 spawn zones for bad guys, away you go.
Yeah.
It is explicitly mission-based. And within that one, you have a lovely crunchy little RPG in which you gradually assemble and build your own mech, the expression of yourself, as you go. Your character sheet as the pilot is very kind of compact. You effectively start with 4 triggers of +2, which could be like, you could say, I'm going to take fighting at +2. Or you could decide to take, I'm going to take getting stuff done at +2. Or I'm going to take getting out of the way at +2. And then whenever you're rolling as a pilot, if you can justify the use of a trigger, you roll at +2. If you improve the trigger to +4, you might roll at +4. Right? So it's specifically pretty hands-off when it comes to the pilot, but the mech gets a ton of detail.
Mhm.
All right.
So the game is focused much more on the mech you're piloting rather than your character being a big thing. Your character is a delicious glaze, as deep as a normal mecha pilot character in a mecha anime is.
Mm.
They are there, they have a couple of character traits. That's what they're doing. It's not, often a ridiculously deep dive into a person with many conflicting drives and everything like that. They're pretty straightforward. Though in fairness, in RPGs, how deep do you really get in a character?
Yeah, like it's not that your character has no effect on your mech palette, which is my pet peeve with a lot of lighter mech RPGs. But it is like you're adding +1s and +2s to a mech here and there. It's separate character sheets, not like a combination of characters.
Yeah. And the thing you have as a character is you pick 4 stats that your mech is built around, and you improve those stats as you level, which are hull sensors. Basically, it's hull sensors, agility, and
Engineering?
basically, yeah. And they adjust stats on the mech. So, like every point of hull is 2 more HP, for example, and every 2 points of hull is +1 repair.
Yeah.
And so you go up and down like that, and then you additionally, your character has talents. He goes down a talent tree, and the talent tree affects the mech combat. So that's actually where your character mech stuff interact.
Yeah.
And then the mech is built of a basic chassis. In the core book, there's just one, the Everest. They've included 2 more over the points that there's a specific hacker one, and one that's a little more off spec, kind of weird one. And then as you build out, you effectively pick up licenses in other types of mech, and you can start mixing the abilities of the two together until you produce your own very distinct mech.
Yeah, it's gotten a lot of buzz for a lot of reasons. One being, of course, the comic writer made amazing art for everything, so it does look very unique stylistically, which is a big plus for let's call brand identity.
Yep.
And also they have a sort of semi-open thing for fan materials, so there are fans out there working on various different interpretations of the rules or
Adventures or whatever else, yeah. I mean, you see, I think it's really cool because it feels like the mech is the big build space where you kind of put some ideas together. Now, in reality, there's some pretty they give you some very good guidance on what to build with those tools. And since you slowly add abilities into your kind of hopper of choices, you get to build out in the way that you would actually kind of like. And the respecking is fairly generous in terms of every time you basically gain a license level, you get to go, okay, I can respec either all my license levels or all my stat allocation or all my talents. And that's kind of useful.
Yeah.
And the other thing about it is you effectively do 3 missions and then you increase in light level. There's no XP or anything like that. It's just like you've done 3 missions, now you go up a light level. Or license level, sorry, not light level. And you keep going like that. So there's theoretically a full-length campaign, I believe is 36 missions.
Yeah, basically an arc of 3 battles is the intended way, and then that's a greater objective done, and you go up the license level.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as the structure goes, I think it's very well. I'd say the main thing about it is like you're immediately going to get that cantankerous thought of, what if my players want to do some freeform game? What if we want to focus on out of mech stuff for a mission or two? And these are things the RPG can somewhat survive, but it is a structured system, and I think behind it all is I don't have a table to put a custom made hex map on, so I can't play this game, and therefore people complain that even though they don't actually want to play the game, they don't have the equipment for it, so they're going to find more.
Play on Foundry.
Yeah, here's the thing: a lot of people have not yet shifted over to the fairly reasonable thing that this is a game designed for either people who have really good printers or have switched over to Foundry or other.
It's explicitly an RPG built by a wargamer, though.
Yes.
And a wargamer is just going to roll up their sleeves at the thought of having to build a table of terrain and
Mhm,
put a bunch of
mhm.
models out. So I mean, that's the thinking on it. And the character stuff is bare bones because Wargamer is going to be like, do you really need to know that much? That's one of the things you have to adjust your expectations when you come into Lancer. It's built explicitly. The setting stuff is by kind of a comic writer, very good comic writer, who's got a lot of very detailed graphical information, some cool ideas and stuff. But the bones of the system are built by a wargamer. It's not perfectly balanced or anything, but it's reasonably tight mechanically. The choices you have in gameplay are very interesting. Your turns are interesting, can take a little while to resolve, but your turns are interesting. And it's a good game. Like, just the game part of it is fun. I would say that if you want kind of a like a very deep role playing experience, it's perfectly fine for that, but it's not going to support any, there's no in deep mechanics supporting that stuff. Yeah, you guys want to talk about what's going on. There is in the so one of my criticisms of it would be that there is not a license level 1 to 12 campaign or 0 to 12 campaign for players to play.
Yeah, they've a couple of adventures to cover. I think like license 0 to 3. I think
Yeah,
is the best you can do.
they were working on one that was meant to be 1 to 12, and then the designer got hired by WotC and got a non-compete, so he can't work on it anymore. So that kind of get ditched, and they've got some other people working on some stuff for it, and there's a lot of one-shot missions around. But what the game actually needs is a full experience campaign, because it's not like other RPGs. You need to have a full-length guided campaign to explain to the GM this is how it works, which is part of the larger argument I occasionally make that without a full length campaign, every RPG is incomplete. That until you have that explains what the play loop of the game is meant to look at, that a GM can look at for inspiration, even if they're never going to run it, that's the game is not complete. It's an idea. It's part of the game is being held up with thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, and that there is this sort of third party people of the enthusiastic fans who've been there since the beta. They're all happy to come up with their own material and shove it around, but it's still their interpretation of the game, and it comes with their hopes and dreams and all the things that was dropped in the beta by the original designers, but the fans loved, so they try to put it back in.
Yeah, but that's what happens when there's gaps in the material.
Yeah.
You got it for Christmas, didn't you, Scarr?
Yes, yes. I got through it, read through it. Again, very impressed by the mech options, and sort of glad to see the that the character stuff was a bit more substantial than I thought. Minimal and light and all that, but I still think there was something there. But the thing I did notice was a big problem was there was a lot of emphasis on what I would call like timeline nonsense and what's going on back home in the safe part,
Yeah.
and not a lot of emphasis on like where's the hot zone. Like,
Yeah. That's again why I think a good campaign is good, because it basically focuses in a little bit on, okay, ignore the big picture for a second. Here's the little picture your characters are actually dealing with. Did any mech jump out at you of going, oh, I want to build one of those?
big guns. I'm a big gun enjoyer. I mean, honestly, there's this part of me that always has wanted to just mess around with the base mech and see if
Oh, the base mech is incredibly strong. It's arguably the strongest mech in the game.
yeah, because very simple, very effective things like extra move actions.
Yeah, its thing is action economy. It's really strong.
Yeah.
Oh my god, the action economy mech's good.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, it absolutely would give me ideas. I think, you could, particularly if your campaigns are going to be relatively short, you could absolutely try out a whole bunch of.
Now, we say relatively short, but that could be 36 missions, which could take you more than a single play session to play. So, kind of short, but in reality, probably a good year of play, maybe more, depending on what goes down.
Absolutely. As I say, we're going to get going through sort of common things of various mech games. I'm not sure that I immediately want to like start a Lancer campaign. I'm certainly curious about it, but I'm also thinking about other mech RPGs, like several other, like I think the Savage Worlds is bringing out its science fiction toolkit again because it has to re-release all of its stuff for each edition, and that had, I think they've upgraded the mech rules for that. There's a few indie RPGs. I was thinking about something called Salvage Union, which is sort of more about wrapping people and hodgepodging together a mech from screws in a cave and all that.
I think Salvage Union is much closer to a traditional RPG than Lancer. Lancer is not a traditional RPG, or it's not a traditional RPG in the way people who always talk about non-traditional RPGs would want traditional RPGs. Like, wait, yeah, so it's basically full of your character and lots of storyline triggers. No, man, it's all combat. What are you talking about? And that's maybe not what people expect, which is always kind of funny. I find the NHP stuff really funny as well.
Yeah, because
they have a thing in it called non-human persons, and the text is pretty explicit. These aren't AIs; these are kind of eldritch intelligences that have been sort of forced into a human mindset, and they have to be shackled. And like, that's what we talk about. We do AI, and while they're shackled, they're comprehensible. They work with you. When they become unshackled, they become uncaring and dangerous. And I'm like, yeah, that's like AI, man. And then they give your mech the AI tag, and I'm like, okay, come on now.
No.
Who's having this argument behind the scenes?
That just seems bizarrely unnecessary as a distinction.
It is what it is. I just thought it was really funny. I was like, okay. These aren't AI, all right. But they have the AI tag. Okay, hold on now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's sort of the thing, is that mechs very much live in this mechs as a gaming medium theme. Very much live in this board-based thing where the very much tension is you're going to bring out a hex map or something equivalent, and you're going to be moving tokens or lovingly rendered models around a thing, and position is going to matter, and you're going to be tracking all the different systems, and that mechanical depth is sort of inherent to the genre, because otherwise you're not in a mech, you're a pretty boy with many problems is just growing to 50 feet tall, pulling out his laser gun that he had in his pocket. So this kind of liminal space where it's an RPG, but it also has these heavy war game elements. I don't think people should be gun shy about them, but it is sort of not inherent, but a very strong part of the genre, I think, as a games mechanic. Which sort of brings us to, the classic. To also have this BattleTech, which is going through this major resurgence of the last few years.
Yeah, huge resurgence. It's very interesting. It was on foot. They ran a Kickstarter for the Clan Invasion box set for their game. And what they used to fund a complete redesign of their minis. And I don't know if you remember BattleTech minis back in the 1980s, but they were...
I vaguely recall some lumps of lead.
There were some lumps of lead, but there's also a bunch of very dorky plastic minis, some of which were recast and resized from Japanese mech designs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In some cases, literally, this used to be a 1 in 44, a 1 to 144 grade thing. We just shrunk this thing down and made it a single frame on a sprue, and here's our mech. And they were somewhat dubious as a result.
Mm-hmm.
But they've redone them and they all look really cool. And Jesus, that was enough to get everyone going. So they made a huge amount of money in the Clan Kickstarter, released a ton of classic mechs and some more up-to-date ones. And then they've done a second go of it now, the Mercenaries Kickstarter, which is struggling with delivery, but is getting stuff out there. And as a result, everyone started playing BattleTech again. But the really funny thing was they hadn't updated BattleTech's rules. They're still using what is effectively, if not exactly the same, a very similar game to the game I played in the 1980s. Which is madness. But there we go.
Speaking about games that need photocopiers.
Yeah, or printing out and laminating sheets or what have you. Have you ever played standard BattleTech?
Never more than a demo game.
Yes.
Because, even though it's as war games go, it's extremely affordable to get in, because you really just need a couple of mech models and a map and some character sheets and some way to either laminate thing or make 57 copies so that you can continue market. It in terms of expense, it is fairly affordable to get yourself a star or two of clan mechs or lance of inner sphere mechs.
Yeah, you're talking basically. You can. They sold pre-boxed sets now, which were more like thematically grouped mechs than actually a balanced lance per se. But you could buy one or two of those and put yourself something together really easily. Or you could basically, they're going to be doing more ones which are kind of like, oh, this is sort of a pre-built force, and they're coming up. So it's not expensive really to get in.
Yeah,
Not compared to 40k or anything like that, and get a full game.
I think for €100 you could very easily have yourself fully set up.
You could buy a core book or the starter box set. The starter box set comes with a bunch of mechs and has the basic rules. Doesn't have the full rules, but has the basic rules. And like people and they're very kind of. The community is a bit like, yeah, we use these rules, we don't use those rules, rather than we don't use the vehicle rules much, but they're making the vehicles easier to use, so there will be more use of the vehicle rules going forward, I'd say. And it's to resolve, it's not ridiculously complex game to resolve. It's just you're kind of vaguely sandblasting away your opponent's army with different weapons until you hit something important, and then the mech falls over or blows up.
Very much.
And it gets funky as it goes along, because if you play with the very basic 30-25, like the starting battle mechs, all the mechs would be considered terrible nowadays. They're all really badly designed and have glaring weaknesses. And the more modern mechs are a lot more sleek, and this does what this does. It is really efficient at what it does. And there's a vast gulf in performance. So they have their own balancing system called battle value, which is what you actually have to build your forces on nowadays. So you can have a lot of kind of fairly crap mechs and they're really cheap, or you can have some very high performance mechs that do their job really well. So it's interesting, and the community has kind of some ideas about how to balance. They mostly balance around battle value to go, okay, this mech's really good, so its battle value is quite high. This mech is really terrible, so its battle value is very low. Build 7,500 battle value of units, and we'll have a game. Which could only mean I've got 4 mechs. That's all. And that's your army. And it can take hours to resolve, because it's kind of an 80s game, and there's a lot of rolling dice and hitting and marking off armor pips. And oh, you hit my arm 3 times in a row. And you're like, is that bad? Yeah, my arm's come off now. Woohoo! But also it's gone into my torso. And now it's penetrated my torso. And I had an ammo bin there, so I explode.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be very kind of, I hit your head. With what? My Gauss rifle. That's me dead. Alright. So it is quite random. They have another game, Alpha Strike, which is strips almost all the detail out and is designed to run really big, large numbers of mechs. So you can now have games with 20 mechs aside, and it's really much quicker to resolve. Or you can have like 5 or 10 mechs aside, and it plays really way faster than standard BattleTech. So it's an interesting one where the game hasn't kind of updated itself. They haven't gone, we're doing a new version of BattleTech yet. This is the same game it was in the 1980s. And I think it would be difficult for them to go, we're doing a new version of BattleTech now, without the pitchforks and without guys gingerly getting out of their chairs, grabbing their walking sticks and advancing on the building.
Yeah.
Because there are horrier elements to the fan base now, which would let me just gently get up. I don't want to strain nothing.
No chance of them just quietly shelving the original and bringing out Gamma Mission.
No, I don't think so.
Or, Delta Attack.
No, their RPG does a weird one where the RPG system for Destiny is kind of halfway between Alpha Strike and the classic one, and I want to give that a go to see what it's like, because I think it might be...
Sounds promising.
Might be a little bit better. And they're going to do a solo and co-op variant now, is coming out this year, at BattleTech Aces, which should be a lot of fun. But when I was a kid, I used to read the TROs. The TROs were the tech spec manuals which detailed the mechs. So I used to have a ton of fun just reading those. So I used to read them for fun. This, and now all these mechs are out now that I can actually get, rather than I can just read about them. Get the.
Although you will probably not find the Japanese designs anywhere.
Yeah, no, they're back. They cut a deal.
Oh, okay.
They were so there's this whole thing where BattleTech needed mech designs, and they were contacted by a Japanese company. And back in the early 80s. Contacting a Japanese company was not a matter of getting on the phone necessarily.
Oh, God, right.
Or going to their website. They were in correspondence that was being translated And they contacted this Japanese company and said, we got a bunch of these mech designs from other stuff. You can use them. And they took mech designs from half a dozen anime shows and manga, including Robotech, Macross.
Yeah.
And addition to that, like, it's not just Macross, it's Dogram, it's, there's a bunch of different series it took its mech designs from.
Yeah.
And what happened then was Robotech gets licensed by a company called, or Macross gets licensed by a company called Harmony Gold, which go, okay, we're doing this. And they go, wait, why is there this game that's using our Valkyrie designs?
Yeah.
And our pods? And like, oh, we licensed it from this Japanese bunch. And they're like, what? No, you didn't. And they'd been scammed to a certain extent. So this whole bunch of mechs became known as the Unseen, because they couldn't reproduce them in art anymore because they no longer had the license, because they had never had the license. They just thought they had the license. And then they redesigned them all in the process called the Rescene, where they were kind of slightly similar thematically, but not. And then they worked out a new deal, and they're able to do much closer to the original designs. They're called the Rescene. So they're back again. Like, there was stuff like, these were classic battle mechs. These were like, the Griffin, the Wolverine,
Yeah.
the Battle Master, the Warhammer, which is one of the cover mechs of BattleTech.
Yeah.
So they've gotten it. So they're slightly modified designs now. They're not but they're very clearly, this is what they were, and they've got a much better deal about it now. And yeah, this is great. They're very nice quality minis. They paint well with like a little bit of contrast. Will basically do you a nicely painted miniature in not a lot of effort. And then you've got really good people who make you feel sad because they'll do like reflections in cockpits and stuff, and you're like, dear sweet God, I feel like a fraud compared to you.
They've had a general update of the aesthetic, and I think a lot of it was sort of pushed by MechWarrior Online, and then MechWarrior 5 pushed a sort of new take on the aesthetic, and that sort of transferred back to the war game, and possibly helped get this new wave of models to really show how BattleTech was unique as a thing, just to sort of unify the whole thing from the, as we say, very done in pencil effect of the 80s designs.
Yeah, and they all look good now. And they've got one artist doing all of the images of the mechs, which means they're much more kind of cohesive look.
Yeah.
Because there were great BattleTech line art for the mechs, and then there were ones that were just dreadful.
Yeah.
And now they're all kind of consistently the same quality. A guy does a really nice job drawing them, and he makes sure all the guns look like the guns. You can nearly tell what a gun is by the look of it.
Yeah, the United art style, I think, is a very noticeable improvement to the whole thing. As I said, the mechs, Dave, I believe you mentioned that you used to play MechWarrior RPG, but when it came time for the big event, the mech battles, you made some compromises.
All right, so the Time of War. A Time of War is the later edition of the MechWarrior RPG.
Yeah, it's a line descent from the classic RPG.
Yeah, so that's the one I'm familiar with. The character creation takes a while. It's life path based, which is fine until you're trying to figure out how it fits together. Anyway, takes a while. So what gems I've played under it have done is everyone is a mech pilot. What this means is that when it comes time for mech battles, everyone can just do stuff. And when it came time for the mech battles, a Time of War system was temporarily dumped in favor of BattleTech. And there's a conversion system for RPG stats into mech stats and all that, and it worked well enough.
Slow to resolve, though, right? Like, ultimately.
So yeah, it takes a while to resolve. Like, it's BattleTech, so it's going to be a few hours, like, for the mech battles.
I remember playing BattleTech Classic RPG at a convention. I think it was a WorkCon. And the whole scenario was we were kind of light and medium mechs going into a city. Basically, GM had kind of set up as the scenario is it's a series of horrible traps by infantry in buildings to teach those mech people a lesson, which is maybe not what you want to be doing with people who've never played the game before. And it was super slow. We got about halfway through the story. We were 4 hours in, and they were like, "Yep, all right, well, you guys got to finish up."
That's not right.
Like, presumably they assumed that all of their fellow MechWarrior people would come out in droves to play the RPG in full understanding of the entire system, only to find that the MechWarrior people were off, the Battletech people were off playing Battletech
Absolutely.
because it's gone, and yeah, there's always Battletech at a gone. But yeah, the sort of we were running into the similar issue to Lancer, that the overlap between RPG and wargame a bit clunky. You know, you just leading into tried and true wargaming mechanics seems to work best in the end, but it means that the mech. I could very easily see a scenario where you sort of have to plan out your game as, okay, this session is going to be a out of mech talkie session. This session is going to be a war games, a war game session. We might need to overflow a bit into the session after, and some people don't like that sort of forced rigidity in their game. They're like, oh, we just flow effortlessly from talkie to combat to chase sequence. It'll be fine. And the system, unfortunately, by having strengths in its tactical depth, loses somewhat in the flexibility of the proceedings, and you're always going to get complaints about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting watching kind of mecha stuff have a bit of a resurgence. I think as an RPG that you kind of play a war game with, Lancer is really fun. Whereas Battletech is much more of it's got a very established setting. And it's interesting in that it's kind of Game of Thrones in space to a certain extent.
Yeah, you've got the houses smacking each other with a weird external threat coming in.
And now, the thing is, they've managed to tamp down how annoyed this fan base got about the later stuff. So people now, fine, you can have the Clan Invasion, or you can have the Jihad, or you can have the Dark Age, or you can have the new Ilkhan era. And there's generally a little bit more acceptance. The 3025 Essentialists are still around, but they accept that, there's other times the game are valid as well, We can also play those, and it's interesting that they've still got their setting. They've still got people writing tons of books, and people can take inspiration from those books. There's a lot to game with in the setting, and that's pretty cool. Even if the system support for it is not ideal, but I'm watching them bring out more stuff. They're doing Hotspots they brought out a book called Hotspots Hinterlands, which is specifically for running kind of a short campaign where you each are a mercenary company. You roll on a table to get where your starting mechs are. Then you start doing contracts and you get offered a contract. Oh, I can do this contract or that contract. And other players in the group can be like, oh, I've got to defend against that one. I've taken the other side of that contract. And then you have a game. And so there's options there for it to be run Alpha Strike or to be run in Classic Battletech. And I know a lot of places are kind of galvanized with this and going, oh yeah, we're totally going to run some of this. So that's good. It makes the setting a lot more gameable, get people playing more. That is all to the good. And I think going forward, you're going to see more and more stuff coming out for it because they're doing very well at the moment. They're making lots of money compared to... And given the Catalyst's problems in the past, particularly with Shadowrun and building houses and renovating houses that they shouldn't have been renovating, it's interesting that they're doing this well off it.
I'm sure there's a story there, but perhaps another day.
There was some Father Ted-esque bizarre financial irregularities. And, everyone didn't get paid for a while, apart from the guy who used hundreds of thousands of dollars to renovate his house.
Oh dear.
Allegedly.
There was a third game we were talking about, and this is going straight into a fully realized board game, but the kind of board game that makes you want there to be an RPG for it.
Yes, there are. Aeon Trespass Odyssey is a RPG or a board game that came out on Kickstarter basically 2 years ago from a Polish company called Into the Unknown. And effectively the pitch of it is ancient Greek mythology meets Evangelion. The world, there's the eschaton, which kills all the gods. There's an explosion in Olympus, which kills all the gods. The 0 point entity destroys them all. And the land fills up with monsters called primordials. And you are the Argonauts, a bunch of people who are awoken from aboard a giant iron ship. And when I say giant iron ship, it is multiple times as big as an aircraft carrier.
All right.
Which wakes you up. You are the Argonauts, and you can junction with Titans. So you can get into a bunch of liquid, which allows you to send your thoughts into the Titan. and then you control this. You barely control this kind of primeval force of nature, a giant human, to fight these even gianter monsters, because the giant monsters have AT fields that you can only break with the Titan.
Mm-hmm.
And they're literally called AT fields. And
Really?
yeah, Aeon Trespass. AT fields.
Oh, right.
They are AT fields.
Okay.
What are you talking about? I did not get a Memnos card called Ikari, which is, a guy going getting the giant robot. So it's a cooperative campaign board game. It is a hard co-op game where it's a complex boss battler, a genre of games that only kind of exists in the last 5 years, where you are taking on a single difficult to fight monster with a AI deck who has actions they do on their turn determined by the AI deck, is difficult to beat on your own, so you need 4 people to team up and fight them. And it's deliberately very difficult. There's a Kingdom Death Monster was the first one, the always controversial Kingdom Death Monster, and then there was this one. There's also a game called Townsfolk Tussle, and there's a couple other ones coming out. They're a specific genre of game, which is they're very good. It's hard co-op though. It's deliberately very challenging. The first release of the core game, there were 3 cycles. They were each campaigns. They're about 40 hours long. So I played the first 3. The next one came out at the end of this year, 4 and 5, which is part of the initial offering, but it's 4 and 5. I completed 4 over Christmas. Had a great time doing it. It's really, really cool. And the 5th one is upcoming. I'm going to handle it over the midterm break. I basically one person. Mostly we play duo, but we've got 2 more people coming in for the last part because they played bits of the other one. Thought it was really cool. I would describe it as the greatest campaign game you should probably never play. It is one of the biggest and best gaming experiences I've ever had, but it's so difficult that it would drive you mad. The reason I do it in one effectively extended setting of 3 or effectively 50 hours of play or 40 hours of play over 4 or 5 days is that the setup and teardown of the game is so rough. It's like a giant game. I built myself a custom gaming table, which is 8 foot by 4 foot, because I wanted to be able to play a classic epic battle if I wanted to, on a classic epic 40k battle if I wanted to on my table. And my table is barely big enough for it. There are chairs that are taken over for rulebook chairs.
Ooh.
It's ridiculous. It is huge. It's sprawling. It's complex. There are lots of subsystems in it. It is really, really cool. It's so cool. The heights in this game are ridiculous, but it's a lot of work to play. It's a lot of work to run. If anyone asks me how good it is, I say it's one of the best games I've ever played. It's the best campaign game I've ever played. And if people say, "Oh, should I play it?" I'm like, "Oh no, God no." But it's amazing. You only should play this one if you really want to play it, and it's deliberately difficult. It can be frustrating sometimes. But if it demands your best effort, if you play really well and keep focused and are good at it, it's manageable. If you're the kind of person who just wants to, I don't want to think about it too much, but pick up some dice and roll them, you'll get hockeyed. Super hockeyed, because it's not that kind of game.
And there's no trainer scenarios, I assume.
Not really. You can play, like the first couple will seem very difficult, and then you'll keep playing, and every time they're like, "Oh my God, how does it get harder every time?" And what it does is it gives you new abilities, and you have to master the play style in that cycle to figure out how to do it. Generally speaking, there's a guy with the first monster you fight is the Dakantire, which is basically a guy made up of hands. He's a monster, and he's just made of hands. So his face is hands, his hands are hands, his legs are hands. You get what I'm saying, right? He's made by hands. And his thing is he's very straightforward. He picks on one person and he hits them and he pushes them back. And that's what he does to start off with. So he also occasionally knocks you down. Knocks you down is really bad. So then you learn, okay, what I do is after he hits me, there's a reaction window, and I use the reaction window to use one of my powers, let me to reflex, so I get to move 1 space. So when he goes to knock me back and knock me down, I go, hold on, in that reflex window, I'm going to step back 1. That doesn't resolve now. And that's how you fight him. And then you're like, okay, he starts knocking you back initially 3. You're like, okay, that I can just walk back in. My move is 5. Now he knocks you back 5. Okay, still manageable. Now he knocks you back 7. Okay. Now he knocks you back 13. Right, this is getting very difficult to get back into melee with him. And then he knocks you back 20. Okay, that's across the board. Now, in this level of the fight, if you hit the end of the board, you die because he pushes you off the cliff. So the game becomes about dealing with all of that stuff. and how do you handle it and how do you deal with it while still winning. It's a really cool game, but it exponentially gets more complex as it goes along. So very quickly, you could be tearing your hair out. Look, Cycle 5, which we're about to do, looks really intimidating. And I'm like, okay, well, guess we're going to figure this one out. But it's really good.
And is it the kind of situation where you're meant to learn during a mission? And
what you're meant to do is you do the mission, you either scrape through or you don't. Like, the game doesn't end if you lose, but you lose a bunch of resources, which is not the best. And there are battles you have to win, but basically what you do is there's a whole research tree like XCOM where you're getting new research projects, and then you pick up a new project and you get new gear out of it.
All right.
And from the gear you develop a loadout for your different mechs that counters his stuff. So, for example, you get a bunch of gear that's like reflex on it. So, like, okay, you're going to knock me back, knock me down. No, I'm not. I'm going to step away at one. So you don't do that. You don't knock me back. You don't knock me down. And I'll also have reflex on gear, and I'll have reflex on some of my ship cards. My ship has other abilities that they can use. Oh, you're about to knock me down. I'm going to use my gear here, which reduces knockback by 5. So I'm only knocked back 3. Oh, you're about to push me and smash me to the wall and kill me. I'm going to basically step here to the side, so your knockback just sends me straight across instead. And I halt myself 3 moves out. Grand. It's all about putting together, oh, I've got better armor now. Oh, I can block attacks now, so I can block one of your dice when it's coming in. And I've got more rerolls to try and block more of your attacks when they're coming in. So that's how you kind of handle, you learn, you put together a build that lets you handle them. But then the bad guys keep leveling up and adding new abilities to their stuff. So there's a constant escalation of you making new gear to make it easy to fight them. And then they evolve again. You have to make new gear to deal with that, or adjust your playstyle to deal with it. And you're fighting effectively 4 bad guys in a cycle. There's 2 regular bad guys you'll fight multiple times for defo, like 4 or 5 times each. More actually. And then there's a boss which you will fight probably 3 or 4 times. And there's a pursuer who is chasing you, who you will fight as often as he catches you. The 2 regular guys are generally pretty manageable once you get the gear sorted out, but you have to keep evolving your gear to deal with them. The boss you will fight a limited number of times, and they are very hard, and you usually use a mix of the other 2 guys' mechanics. But you will, like, for example, the second bad guy is the Labyrinthoros. He's like a giant mechanical bull with an eldritch monster inside.
Oh.
And his thing is he knocks you down, he puts down labyrinth tiles, which are tiles you got to move around to get to him. And if he runs over you, he kills you. So his whole thing is he knocks you down and then runs over you. And so it's all about finding ways to not be in front of him so that when he runs forward, he doesn't squash you. So you find ways to move your guys. So, actually, he's going to knock me down here, or he's not going to knock me down there. I'll start using range 2 gear so I can stand on a corner and he doesn't do his knockback and knockdowns on corners. So you build around them and you handle them that way. And then the nemesis is a jerk who's initially just toying with you. So he's really dangerous, but he's not as impossible to fight as when you actually hurt him. And then he stops toying and he's much harder to fight. And then you have to find a way to kill him. So you're going to get to choose when you're going to kill the boss. So, for example, the first nemesis we killed near the end of cycle 2. We were like, okay, fed up with this guy, let's kill him. And we get some new gear out of it, and that's cool. And then we fight a new guy. Then new nemesis comes along. So every time you kill nemesis, another one's going to show up in the next cycle. So it's not ideal. But it's a really cool game. And it's deliberately very difficult. Very, very difficult.
And each of these cycles is a different Kickstarter expansion, or do they all come in the same box?
No. The first game came with 3 Kickstarters. The first one is The Truth of the Labyrinth, which is set on Crete, where you're taking on basically these monsters who appear out of the labyrinth, this geometric series of lines, which is some sort of mimetic thing, but also spatial thing. They come out of that. There's quite a sci-fi element despite being set in ancient Greece and you've been channeling the power of the gods.
And it got that mix, that classic mix of aesthetics.
Yeah. And so you fight those guys, and it's about, that story is also about, you're kind of dealing with 3 different groups of NPCs. The Hornsworn, who were Theseus's men, the cult of the Labyrinth, and the ruling King Minos's daughters and their court. And you're kind of dealing with all of those 3. And in the end, if you get all 3 of them to ally at the end of the game, you basically get more benefits for resolving the problem. And you guys are the big heroes who eventually get stuff together, or don't if you mess up. And then the second one, we had to go to Sparta, and we fought the guy called the Nietzschean, who's arguably the best bad guy in it. He's the kind of the coolest bad guy. He's another guy piloting a big giant titan, and that cycle was all about effectively conducting a war against the Nietzschean without sacrificing too much of your humanity. Because his point was, you got to sacrifice your humanity to beat the best, to beat off the dangers that exist here. And then the third one is we went to Delphi, and it was all about time travel. So there was effectively there was a time loop we had to resolve, and that was part of the gameplay of it. So basically, every so often, your ship would flash back to where you started your time loop. So you had to basically extend your time loop and then get to a place where your time would reset, so you could start from a new point. Otherwise, you'd be zipped back across the map to where you started.
Oh.
And then the fourth cycle was the Gardens of Infinite Growth, which is in Persia, where they are gone crazy with capitalism, and everything is basically being sacrificed to make everybody richer. So your whole thing there is fighting against the curses and the wishes that have occurred as a result of everyone becoming obsessed with wealth. And then the fifth one is basically an evil version of your ship has shown up, and an evil Titan is chasing you, Titan X, and it's about running away from them, and the theme is despair, so I'm really looking forward to that one. It's not going to be oppressive or hammering me over the head with it at all.
And wow, but this all came in the starter
The
box.
first Kickstarter was cycles 1 to 3. No, the first Kickstarter was actually cycles 1 to 5. But it's so big that they did cycles 1 to 3 as one big box set, and cycles 4 to 5 as a second big box set. First box set came in 2000. Oh, was it 22? I think it was 22. And then the second one came at the end of last year. I got it in November, and we played it in December. So the first three, very, very good. I think arguably, you can argue about which one's your favorite. I think the second one's cycle 2 is incredibly strong. Cycle 3 is very good, but cycle 2 is incredibly strong. Some of the moments in it were better in cycle 3, but cycle 2 had a very satisfying story of fighting a bad guy that you could really sink your teeth into why you didn't like him.
Wow. And I just overwhelmed by the RPG-ish vibes from this. And
huge.
Is there any news of them? Have they promised, in a Kickstarter expansion to make a fully realized RPG system, or?
No. One nutter is basically writing most of this, and he has deliberately done it as this is my kind of magnum opus sort of thing. Like there's a sequel game, kind of parallel game coming out as well, called the 12 Sins of Heracles, which is going to be coming out maybe the end of this year, probably next year. Which is, again, it's going to be 4 cycles: summer, autumn, winter, spring. Each one of which involves you facing off 3 of the labors of Hercules in some kind of way.
Right.
It is sort of like there's a huge amount of role playing in it when you're playing it, in that you get choices all the way along. So you'll be doing an adventure hub, and it'll tell you, okay, do you want to help these guys or these guys? And there's big mechanical effects off that, but there's also as you make choices, there's basically a matrix on the sheet, one of the sheets, which is marked from A1 to A12, B1 to B12, all the way down to AA1 to, and so on. And you mark one of those, and later on in the story, it'll go, did you mark, is B7 marked? Okay, this character is here because you saved them earlier. Or you didn't save them, and you marked a different box and they're dead. So you basically go back to all of this stuff, and it's really good. So there's a story evolves, and you get to tell that story as you go. So there's quite a strong kind of RPG or, storytelling element within the game. You're each playing your own characters, but your characters will retire along the game. So you effectively have Memnos cards, which represent your memories. And they appear, and as you do certain story nodes, they advance as well, and you start to tell your own character story. At the end of it, you get the choice between retiring the character or not retiring the character, and it's always better to retire the character. You can keep it if you want, but you retire the character, their Memnos node goes into Memnos Vault, and that person leaves the Argo and goes out to fulfill their destiny elsewhere. And so you get a new Argonaut. So you start out with a set of them, and they're kind of rotating through them, and you don't have them forever. Basically, that's part of the game. So the first one was 3 cycles. So there was 9. There's 9 primordials. There were 2 nemeses, and then you had there's 4 kind of standard model titans you start with, and then there's another 12 titans you can earn through the game, like special ability titans, which are usually built from the monsters you've killed or inspired by the monsters you killed.
Yeah.
It's got an inverse combat pyramid so that you get stronger the longer combat goes on until you die. And it's really cool. It's an amazing board game, but it takes ages to play. It's very difficult. It's not a simple board game to play. It requires a big time commitment, but honestly, I had the most fun of it. I'm saying I played. There's this big gear building thing where you get together all this gear, dozens of options, and you put together your kind of ideal way to fight the monsters you're going to fight. You're going to put together a plan and be like, all right, cool, we're going to do this, and this is probably going to work. Not a cheap game at all, but really cool.
Very much in that
the luxury lifestyle. This is going to eat a bunch of time, but I had an amazing experience playing it, so I have no regrets getting in.
Yeah. But man, I mean, it just sounds inspiring, and
it's super cool.
And I think is one of the things about mechs is like because they tend to have these big epic settings, and you're maybe not the outright most powerful people, but you are these like you're as I say, the lancer, the cavalryman. You're coming in upon your mighty metal steed to save the day in this vital part of the fight, and that's just. That just sort of has an inherent inspiring thing. Places you in the setting as you're maybe not King Emperor, but you are this very important knightly figure, even if you are a traumatized teenager. And that means there's an awful lot of character to you. You're not just a metal box walking around with a laser gun on it. You're doing something.
Yeah, it's the idea kind of that comes out of, to a certain extent, like the best mecha or super robot stuff, which is that with this weapon you can kind of defy fate, you can defy the forces that are otherwise impossible to defy, and you can fight them back. It's the old in a Jaeger, you can take on the storm, you can win. And that's really cool as a kind of a concept that that's one of the things in the game is like, no, we can win this, we can beat the unbeatable. And there's some moments in the story that towards the end of some of the cycles, I wouldn't spoil it for you, but the incredible stuff had us popping at the table, where there's a bit where we all get killed and you just hear a voice go disengage Triskelion limiters and we all stand back up. There's a mechanic in the game, right? When your character dies, there's basically when your mech takes enough damage, there's a deck called the Obel deck, and the Obel deck has 2 cards in it. You live and you die, right? And when you die, your Titan dies. You lose the Titan, but your character doesn't die. But then there's other mechanics that layer on top of that. But when your Titan dies, there are these 2 cards. And then you'll do something, the You Die card goes out, there's a second You Die card, and there's an effect on it. And you roll a dice when you die, and on a 10, you awaken. Your character basically comes back to life in a god form.
Oh.
Which is, initial god form you get is Zeus. And they added on more models for the one. So you basically... Character said, roll 10 now, so lightning blast, and now I have additional abilities and I'm stronger. So, no, I'm not actually dead. I am back. Some of the gameplay moments you'll get like that, You don't want to be in a situation where you're relying on awakening, but sometimes you just awaken and win the fight anyway. That's cool. It's really, 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 really fun as a game, but it's also really hard. So I'm always like, I would never recommend it whole cloth to people because I was like, it's really tough, guys. Don't. If you get frustrated by kind of failure, don't, It's an overproduced, crazy game with a ridiculous playtime, but the highest of experiences I've had playing it of kind of any game.
But yeah, all of the many different types of mecha game are out there, and I feel like an awful lot of the complaints that people might have about, this requires too much maps, this is too mechanically clunky, it just goes to show that people want to play this style of game, but they all have their own specific flavor, own specific requirements, own specific hoops to jump through. And, people want to have these super flexible games, but, drilling down to your specific experience can create something very unique and just compelling, I think, is the main thing that these aesthetics, these mechanical choices, that's what they cause. They make the game's compelling, even if sometimes it makes it a little bit awkward. And that's not a terrible price to have to pay. But yes, if you have a death wish that only flying a Gundam into the heart of the sun can solve, or you'd like to have a laser duel battle with a sword made out of thunder with us, you can hit us up on our social media and have mechanized combat or just a lively debate with us, whatever you want, or come join our Discord for personal duels. But for now, this party's over. Thanks for listening to the Adventure Party. You can find show notes and links to things we've mentioned at www.theadventuringparty.net and on our Facebook page. You can leave comments there or record a message at www.speakpipe.com/theadventuringparty. We can also be contacted by email at party@theadventuringparty.net. If you'd like to be in touch with the party all the time, come join our Discord server. Links in the show notes. The Adventuring Party is released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike version 3 license.